Hey friends, how are you tonight? I am reading chapter 15 from the Trumpet of the Swan.
Matthew Conauer, please come to the office. Matthew Conauer, please come to the office.
Sorry about that. They asked me to read it after school, so there's a few announcements, but the title of our chapter is called A Night at the Ritz. So when the desk clerk at the Ritz Hotel saw the boatman enter the lobby, followed by an enormous snow-white swan with a black beak, the clerk didn't like it at all. The clerk was a carefully dressed man, very neat, his hair nicely combed, and the boatman stepped up boldly to the desk. "I'd like a single room for tonight for my friend here," said the boatman. Clerk shook his head. "No birds," he said. "The Ritz doesn't take birds." "You take celebrities, though, don't you?" asked the boatman. "Well, certainly," replied the clerk. "You'd take Richard Burton or Elizabeth Taylor, wouldn't you, if they wanted to spend the night?" "Well, of course," replied the clerk. "You'd take Queen Elizabeth, wouldn't you?" "Of course." "Well, okay," said the boatman. "My friend here is a celebrity. He is a famous musician. He created a sensation in the public garden this afternoon. You must have heard the commotion. He's a trumpeter swan and plays like the great Armstrong." The clerk gazed suspiciously at Louis. "Has he any luggage?" asked the clerk. "Luggage?" cried the boatman. "Take a look at him. Look at the stuff he's got with him." "Well, I don't know," said the clerk, staring at Louis's possessions, his trumpet, his money bag, his slate, his chalk pencil, his life-saving medal. "A bird is a bird. How do I know he hasn't got any lice? Because birds often have lice. The Ritz won't take anybody that has lice." "Lice?" roared the boatman. "Did you ever see a cleaner guest in your whole life? Look at him. He's immaculate." At this, Louis held his slate up to the clerk. "No lice," he wrote. The clerk stared in amazement. He was beginning to weaken. "Well, I have to be careful, he said to the boatman. "You say he's a celebrity. How do I know he's famous? You might be kidding me about that." And just then, three girls entered the lobby, and they were giggling and squealing, and one of them pointed at Louis. "There he is," she screamed. "There he is. I'll get his autograph." And the girls rushed up to Louis. The first girl held out a pad and a pencil. "May I have your autograph?" she asked. Louis took the pencil. Very gracefully, he wrote "Louis" on the pad. More squeals, more giggles, and the girls rushed away, and the clerk watched in silence. "There," said the boatman. "Is he a celebrity or isn't he?" And the clerk hesitated. He was beginning to think he would have to give Louis a room. So at this point, Louis had an idea. He lifted his trumpet and began to play an old song called "There's a Small Hotel." "There's a small hotel with a wishing well." His tone was beautiful. Guests passing through the lobby paused to listen. The clerk leaned his elbows on the desk and listened attentively, and the man behind the newsstand looked up and listened. People sitting in the lounge put down their drinks and listened, and the bellboys stared and listened, and for a few minutes, everything stopped in that lobby. While Louis played, he charmed everyone who could hear. Chambermaids in the bedrooms paused in their work to listen to the trumpet. It was a moment of sheer magic. And as the song came to an end, people who knew the words sang them softly. "When the steeple bell says good night, sleep well, we'll thank the small hotel together." "How about that?" asked the boatman, grinning at the clerk. "Is this Swan a musician or isn't he?" "He plays a sweet trumpet," the clerk said. "But there's one more question that I hesitate to bring up. What about his personal habits? Will he mess the room all up? Because actors are bad enough. Musicians are worse. I can't allow a bird to occupy one of our beds. It might put us out of business. Other guests might complain." I sleep in the bathtub, Louis wrote on his slate. Will not disturb bed. The clerk shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Who's going to pay the bill, he asked. I am, replied the boatman. I'll be here early tomorrow morning when Louis checks out. The clerk couldn't think of any more reasons for not letting the Swan have a room. Very well, he said. Sign the register, please. And he handed Louis a pen and a card. And Louis wrote, Louis the Swan, Upper Red Rock Lake, Montana. The clerk studied it. He seemed satisfied at last. He summoned a bellboy and handed him a key. Take this gentleman to his room, he ordered. Louis removed his medal, his trumpet, his slate, his chalk pencil, and his money bag, and he handed them to the bellboy, and together they walked to the elevators, and the boatman said goodbye. Sleep well, Louis, called the boatman, and be ready to come to work promptly in the morning. Louis nodded. The elevator door opened. This way, sir, said the bellboy. And they entered the elevator and waited for the door to close, and a rich smell of perfume filled the air. Louis stood very still, and then he felt himself rising. The elevator stopped at the 7th floor, and the bellboy led Louis to his room, unlocked the door, and ushered him in. Here you are, sir, he said. Would you like a window open? The bellboy put Louis's luggage down, snapped on a few lights, opened a window, and laid the room key on the dresser, and then he waited. I guess he wants a tip, thought Louis. So he went to his money bag, loosened the drawstring, and took out $1. Thank you very much, sir, said the bellboy, taking the $1. And he went out and closed the door softly behind him. Louis was alone at last, alone in a room at the Ritz. Louis had never spent a night alone in a hotel. First, he walked around and around, turning on lights, turning off lights, examining everything. And in the writing desk, he found a few sheets of lettered paper that said, and you're going to have to listen to the next chapter to find out. Thanks for joining me this afternoon.